Right, well, good afternoon. I was here in 2005, so it's changed a lot. It's a good excuse to come back and have a nose around. It's much brighter and much better than I was here, so you're onto a good thing. Great week so far. I was covering the Leveson inquiry on Monday at the High Court, and I have to say I was following your Twitter feed, which I think was trending on Twitter at some point on Monday. Globally, I thought it was the UK, so globally, that's a hell of an achievement. But Jon Snow, anyone come to Jon Snow? Good? Better? Fantastic? Lots of good stories? That was good to follow. So it's, I'm in kind of very good company, actually. I totally agree with John that it's, what did he say, the golden age of journalism. There's so much. There's blogging, there's tweeting, there's TV, there's radio, there's papers, there's magazines. You name it, it's there. Which means news is alive and well. The downside being is that there's possibly a lot of competition to get into that. But like I say, you're in a great position now, and the opportunities have never been so abundant. So it's a great time to be doing it. I don't want this to be a talk. I don't want this to be a lecture. So if you want to put your hands up, ask me absolutely anything at any time. Just say so, okay? I don't want this to be a one-way street. I'm keen to hear from you as well. So just a bit about me. I was here in 2005. I did a postgrad in biomedia journalism, so radio and TV. Studied under Richard, who we all remember very well. And then I got a bursary scheme place at ITV, which happened to be in Leeds, so I didn't go far. And I've been there ever since. I did 2 years covering Lincolnshire and East Yorkshire out of an office in Grimsby, and then came back to Leeds for 6 months. And for the last three and a bit years, I've been working out of London as a lobby correspondent covering politics. So it's kept me busy. I've covered. The first thing I had to cover was the MP's expenses scandal. I think we all remember that quite well. It was one of the biggest things to come out of Westminster for many, many years. Not a great way to introduce yourself to these MPs. The first time I've met many of these MPs was to ask them about their expenses, and they, as you might expect, weren't too keen to speak about it. But after then, it was a general election, which is obviously one of the most the closest elections for years, and now what has been a controversial coalition. So it's kept us busy, and it's been a really interesting time to be doing what I'm doing. We've got an office in Westminster, just across the road from the Houses of Parliament. I'm a lobby correspondent, which means I can go into the Houses of Parliament. I can go into to the lobbies, it's called. It's the door just outside of the House of Commons floor itself. Good place to go into to chat to MPs. The lobby rules are, if an MP tells you something in there, it's anonymous, so you can tell the story, but it's a source or someone I've spoken to. But wandering around the Parliament, lots of MPs, you speak to them. It's amazing how much you can pick up wandering around. It's a strange old place, very old-fashioned, as you might expect. But we do coverage on calendar, so ITV Yorkshire, I hope you've all watched it at some point, 6 o'clock each evening. We do political coverage on there, but doing politics for calendar, you've got to make it interesting, not for the people who are interested in politics, not for the people that have a passing interest, but you've got to make it watchable, because people watch our programme for sport, for news, all kinds of things. So I try to use a lot of pictures in politics. I find, anyone here find politics massively boring?
I was going to say that. I was just going to ask quickly. Defence story yesterday on calendar, they used a map and they had graphics of the planes and the missiles and what have you.
This was the RAF Waddington. The Defence Secretary went to Waddington. I wasn't. I was doing something else. We've got a Lincoln reporter. So he went along to that. It's not just me that does politics. You know, anyone can do politics. Any of you can do politics. It's just a news story. It's no different to any other story whatsoever. I tend to be the first point of contact, but anyone can do a political story. But it's all about, like yesterday, it's all about making it interesting. There's nothing worse, I don't think, than a talking head with politics. It glosses over most people, paint it with pictures, really try hard to make it engaging and above all relevant. If it's not relevant to you, you're not going to bother watching it. So make it relevant. And we have a political show once a month. And so away from calendar, we have a studio in Westminster, and we get 3 MPs in, 1 from each party, and talk to them about what's big in the region over the last month. And we've got we did a roundup at the end of last year of it was a review of the year. End of the year, we talked to the MPs. What was big? What wasn't? What were the biggest stories of the year? So I thought, if you guys want to have a watch and just see the type of thing we covered, you might remember the Rose Garden. So John Stapleton presents. You might recognise him off what was GMTV, which is now Daybreak. He's our presenter. Full screen. And this is from our Westminster studio, the last programme of last year. There's a highlight of what we did in
Here's just a snapshot of the last 12 months.
We were talking about this last year. We were talking about a really quite successful first year for the coalition. This year has been far more challenging for them.
Nobody quite knew how things would develop, how the parties would settle down, or really what needed to happen. So 2011 has been about bedding in, stability, letting the dust settle, and parties really finding their feet.
I'm sure some people will want to give me a piece of their mind. And you know, I've always, as a politician, always trying to make myself accessible. I've always tried to engage in debate.
You are responsible for the 40 grand's worth of debt we're going to have when we leave uni.
The facts are that not enough people voted for the only party that wanted to get rid of fees, the Liberal Democrats.
You've had the aftermath of the student issue of the end of last year.
We're not giving up on this. You think you've won this round, you're up. More education cuts!
We're actually pressing ahead with important capital expenditure here in the north, and also we've got the Regional Growth Fund to make sure we target investment in those areas that need it most.
That was a big political moment in May, a disaster for the Lib Dems losing control of Sheffield and Hull, and also in the AV referendum. It was a pretty overwhelming result nationally, and particularly in Yorkshire. Yorkshire said overwhelmingly no to AV.
Jarvis, Dan, 14,007.
The selection of Dan Jarvis to become the candidate for the Labour Party was quite unexpected. He knocked out a lot of local candidates, ex-soldier, military background.
It's a great honour. It's a real privilege to be a Member of Parliament.
We'll need a long period with nobody getting sent to prison, with no expenses scandal, for the public to really be trusting us truly again.
Lots of people have, for the first time ever, stood up, gone outside and protested in a way they haven't done before.
It's too late for me, but I still care about what happens to everybody else and what happens to our services.
Not just for myself, it's for my colleagues throughout Grimsby, Cleethorpes and the area.
It's making sure that we maintain that type of scheme for the long term.
Now we're really getting to the stage where the cuts are starting to kick in, and some really tough and hard decisions are being made up and down the country, and in many ways nobody is immune across the whole public sector.
These are the people affected by the cuts, and that's the sort of movement we want.
We will halve the tolls on the Humber Bridge.
Yes!
2012 will be a time when certain fault lines that you can see at the moment start to become maybe gaping holes.
This year, it's not been nearly as easy a job, and I think that there's been a number of Conservatives and Lib Dems who've realised the rude awakening of what power means.
It's the economy. It continues to be the number one issue. It'll be the defining issue of this Parliament, the defining issue of the next election, probably.
Well, Lord Smith, would you agree it's been a rude awakening for the coalition?
So that was 2011. This is how our political show works. John then has a chat to the the 3 MPs. Well, it's 2 MPs and there's a Lord in the middle. We don't have too many Lib Dem MPs left in our region anymore after the last election, so we have a few on rotation. But do you think everything was covered? Anything that was glaringly missed from that? Student fees, protests, anyone go out on those over the last few years? No? Don't want to own up to it?
I did. I'm a teacher.
The big issue. It went on and on, but I think public sector cuts and strikes, and what we try to do is, like I said before, pictures. There's nothing I hate more than a piece just full of talking heads. I mean, you're watching something, you're watching TV, so you want to watch something. Okay, so that was what happened in 2011. The last chap you saw on that clip was a chap that was the political correspondent for the Yorkshire Post, but he's going to turn gamekeeper from being a poacher. He's going to be a government press officer soon. So you can see how it's all linked together, and it's a kind of revolving door of people. Any questions about anything so far?
We had Richard Pepe out in half an hour ago, and he said that today people aren't interested in politics, they're more bothered about things like the only way is Essex. I wondered how you want to get more, particularly young people, interested in who the Prime Minister is?
Very good question. I've heard it before many a times, and I mean, who here finds politics not very interesting and quite boring? Be honest. Well, it's a challenge basically. It's try and find a way of livening it up, and it probably leads very well onto the next clip actually. I was going to ask who here uses Twitter, but who here doesn't use Twitter or Facebook? No Twitter, no Facebook. Why? Why not?
I do have Facebook. I don't have Twitter because I find it too distracting. I have another social media, at my disposal. I just get distracted all the time, and I've got too much to do.
I see the argument. I couldn't live without it now, I don't think. So much of news is broken over Twitter and less over Facebook. Facebook is more discussions. But to answer your question, what we have tried to do is, over the last few years, is something that radio has been doing for a long time, viewer interaction. Radios have had phone-ins for years and years. And I think it's been a staple part of the radio schedules for absolutely years. And I think TV is just catching up now, or has been doing for the last couple of years. So one of my jobs is to cover the party conferences each year. So once a year I spend 3 weeks going to various conference venues and living out of hotels to cover these conferences, which again can be very boring to watch. And as part of that, we do a sit-down with each of the party leaders each year. And so this year we tried doing something a bit different, just to make it a bit more interesting, a bit more engaging. Where are we?
Over the last 3 weeks, we've been asking the leaders of the 3 main political parties some of your questions. First, the Deputy Prime Minister.
I didn't come into government to make cuts.
Then, the leader of the Labour Party.
I think the government was wrong to get rid of regional development agencies.
Today, as the Conservative Party continued its conference in Manchester, it was the Prime Minister's turn.
Prime Minister, a week after 899 workers in Brough were told they face losing their jobs, Maxine Dawson from Sheffield says, what are you going to do to get skilled workers back into work?
Well, we're setting up enterprise zones across the country, and there are enterprise zones obviously in the Yorkshire and Humberside area. That will help. We're investing in more apprenticeships than there have ever been in this country, an additional 250,000 apprenticeships across this parliament. We're cutting corporate taxes to encourage businesses to grow and invest. In almost every single way we can, we're doing things that make it easier for people to start businesses, grow businesses, expand and employ people. We've had to take difficult decisions over spending cuts, but we're investing in regions like Yorkshire.
Moving on to something completely different, car insurance has been a big issue for us here on Calendar. What are you going to do to tackle it, says Angela Green, her 17-year-old son. Wise place to pause it. So this is what we tried to do. We've got a lot of followers on Facebook. They get into discussions and the same on Twitter. So we've tried to just open it up. So it's one thing me asking the questions I think people want answering, but to actually get them in and ask the questions on their behalf is another one. And I think it's a way of interacting with people that might not be interested in politics, but they now get the chance and they feel as if they're having an input and having a say. So it's something we tried last year. We think it worked quite well. This interview was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We put a request for questions on first thing in the morning. We ended up getting about 50 questions, some of which you couldn't possibly put to a Prime Minister. So once we went through them and found, let's say, the more sensible questions, we put a few to him. The danger is you only get a set amount of time with someone like David Cameron. So we ended up asking about 4 or 5 questions. So the benefits of it, people feel like they're being engaged with, they're getting their chance to put questions to these people. The downside is that you have to leave a lot of questions out. And I think if someone takes the time to put a question forward and they don't get that question asked, they feel a bit disappointed. But the more we do it, the more chance they have of getting a question, and it seems to go down quite well. And I mean, to be honest, it's just the TV version of what radio has been doing for a long time. Because like I say, phone-ins have been in existence for a long time, and that's all that is. And we're just trying to do it. We've got a great graphics team at Calendar, so I think it worked. Anyone else have anything to say about it? Feel free to say what's not quite working. You think it's more interesting, perhaps a straight one-to-one?
Obviously, you're trying to reposition it and put it within this sort of FB environment, which you're going to try and appeal to all the Facebook users. Politics is on Facebook as well, that kind of story. But my question would be, isn't it a little bit sort of tokenism and window dressing? Because you're not really going to get to the heart of an issue. All you're going to get is whatever David Cameron's going to kind of spiel out on that day to do with, a sort of pat answer for an issue. Yeah. I mean, they expect, they know the questions you're going to ask sometimes. A bit further on, there's a question about child benefit, and we did get into that a bit more. I asked him exactly what the amount of child benefit was. To his credit, he actually got the exact amount, which Nick Clegg fell foul of a few years ago. He didn't know how much a pension was. I do know what you're saying. We wouldn't necessarily do this every time. If there was an issue that you wanted to tackle someone on, we would do a sit down and get a bit further into it. But you've got to remember that we only have a minute and a half, a minute 50, 2 minutes on a programme. It's not quite like Newsnight where you have a bit longer to get into it. And that's what our political show is good for doing. We have half an hour, we can drill a bit deeper. It is sometimes frustrating when you can't dig down as much as you want to. When you asked earlier on about do you find politics boring, it's not politics being boring, it's the fact that you never feel you're getting a straight answer from them, and you're always getting some edited version of a press release or a policy statement, and it's never anything that's real.
Is that a problem with journalists, or is that a problem with politicians?
Well, that's coming from them, so that's a problem with the way that they're not responding to the questions, because all they're giving you is this policy statement. The same thing. If you've asked them 5 different questions, they'll give you the same answer 5 times.
I think as everyone is, a lot of people are very media trained now. So David Cameron has a team of press officers, as does Nick Clegg, as does Ed Miliband. MPs have press advisors. If you do a minister You see them walking across to you to do the interview with their press officer in their ear, constantly reminding them what the message is. And you've seen what happens if you go off message. You can get, in an interview, if you get something horribly wrong, especially for politicians, it can be a pretty tough time afterwards. So I do agree, it's difficult to get the real answer, but that's why if you do get a cracking answer and you do dig down, it can often make your story. And that's why when you see a fantastic quote in a newspaper, you will see other newspapers quoting that quote, TV channels, News at 10, David Cameron speaking to the Daily Telegraph said, and that's when you know you've got a cracking story. And that's when they know they won't make the same mistake again and repeat what they just said.
I actually teach political communications, not how to do it, but kind of, critiquing it or whatever. And one of the things that a lot of academics say is the seemingly adversarial relationship is nothing of the sort. That actually you're all far too cosy with the politicians and vice versa. Do you have anything to say to that?
It's been said before. It was said at the time of the expenses scandal, it was claimed that the lobby journalists knew all about it for years and didn't say anything. It's been said that journalists, cozy up is the wrong word, but would tend not to do a story and lose a contact that may provide you with stories in the future. It possibly has been the case, if politics is your lifeblood. But I do think now, as I said before, there's so many outlets, there's so many bloggers, there's so many tweeters, that these guys are probably being more challenged than they ever have done before. Certainly, now they're all on Twitter. They're just a tweet away from their electorate and people trying to quiz them. So it may have possibly been the case in the past. I certainly wouldn't have a problem asking an MP certain questions. I would never not do a story to keep them to contact. If I had a cracking story, I'd do it. And I think they'd understand that. But I can see why it's happened, or it's said to have happened in the past. It's been described as a cozy club. But there's too much out there now. There's too many mediums for that to carry on, I think. There's too many people ready to be that person that criticises them. Would you agree with that?
Partially, but not entirely.
Any other questions on this type of thing? Yeah?
Have you ever caught an MP out, with a question?
Off the top of my head, this was the one that I tried to do, the most prominent, the most senior one I've tried to do. Didn't work. He got it down to the penny, how much child benefit was. But catching out, I guess, is perhaps the wrong word. I'm not in the market of catching out MPs or catching out people. If they say something and you want to follow it through, then keep going. But I wouldn't say catching them out is the right way to say it. That implies definitely implies a poacher kind of element to it. They're very good talkers. They know their stuff. They're very well media trained. Getting an MP to be very honest is probably something I try and do, and I think hopefully I get it done quite well. But there's always that problem of breaking down that media training barrier. As you say, they're on message. They know what to say. Especially the higher up in government you go, the best they are at doing it. That's why they're there. Anything else? Well, let's. How much have you guys done on regional news? Have you touched on regional news at all? I know Nicola Rees was in earlier. Did you catch some of her talk from the BBC Look North? Yeah. Calendar, ITV Yorkshire, perfect timing to. And when you pick up an award, you have to brag about it. We won the Royal Television Society's award last week, basically the best regional news programme in the country. we're really, really pleased about that. We put a lot of work into last year and it had some great stories. I just thought I'd show you just a couple of the stories that was in that.
Complete disregard.
So the first, we had to put 10 examples of the best stories we had across the year. It used to be a case of you had to put a show in. You had to put a half-an-hour show and the judges would say which is the best programme in the country. This year they changed it slightly. You could pick 10 of your best pieces. And 2011 for us, Stephen Griffiths, the guy who called himself the crossbow cannibal in Bradford, killed three women. We covered that hugely. A big talking point. I mean, it's Shipley Way, it's not far from here. It was a huge, huge national story. We had a lot of journalists on that story for weeks at a time. And after he got sentenced, we did what's called a backgrounder. All the stuff you cannot say during the trial for obvious reasons, swaying a jury. I'm sure you've gone through or having to go through all your law courses, so you'll be very aware of that. But this is a piece we did. This is a girlfriend of Stephen Griffiths, and she was tracked down by one of our reporters who made some calls, knocked on her door, went in and spoke to her. And this was an exclusive, it was a calendar exclusive, no one else had this interview. And he also managed to get hold of something else as well, which again, no other news organisation in the country had.
Disregard for life. Totally.
But the most chilling legacy of Cathy's relationship is the messages he left her on her answer phone. Some left just hours after non-harassment orders had expired.
If you're going to blame me for doing things to you, then I might as well start doing things to you. Alright? You've got so many enemies there, and you want to add me to them. I don't want to have to do it to you. At least have the decency to text or email me what it is I am supposed to have done. You're just a idiot. I'm trying to help you. I'm not going to go away, so I guess you'd better. I'm going to be in Wakefield quite a lot in the next few weeks, so... But don't worry, I won't be knocking on your door the next time.
The last message we have to warn you is particularly disturbing. Left at 3:30 in the morning, there are no words, just this. Professor David Wilson, a former prison governor, is the country's leading expert on serial killers.
The first thing to say is it's very unusual to get access to the voices of serial killers when they are talking in what is essentially an intimate way to somebody that they know well. I imagine that the tape that you have, and especially of the laugh at the end of the sequence of messages that he's left, will probably be the most iconic thing that we will ever have about Stephen Griffiths. The tape with the laugh is probably just as iconic as that image of Myra Hindley taken after her arrest.
Not.
Any thoughts? Have you ever seen that before, heard it before?
I watched, you know, when you did it first time round.
Yeah.
I thought the music really added to the piece, I thought.
It was, we have, I think the story was chilling enough, but we have a fantastic editor who can tell a story very well through the pictures. I think two things about that was, the first is that Google was a great start on any story. The first thing I do is type it into Google, see if there's anything that comes up straight away. I seem to remember when I was here in 2005, Google was actually banned from the computers. It was switched off. So we had to learn how to make phone calls. But I usually start with Google, do a bit of a quick bit of research, and then make some phone calls. But I think that just goes to show what you can do if you get out there and start knocking on some doors. I think it's something that is perhaps, with the demands of filing so many stories in a day, becoming less and less. But that was simply down to a reporter sitting down with her, talking about it, asking a few questions, and it turned out she'd kept these messages on her phone. The second difficult thing, that was audio, and we're TV, and so we had to think of a way to try and get it across on TV. So we came up with the idea of going to Bradford, treating those shots. I think it's trying to paint a picture for essentially what could have been a radio piece. I think you see it nowadays where if they're playing an audio recording, they do it quite a bit. You see the audio bars coming up, just something to see when you're watching it. But it was, like I say, getting into a house, speaking to the people involved, not just on the phone, in person, and asking the right questions. And that's what you can come up with, which was quite a good thing to get, I think.
How long did it take you to sort of build up that relationship? Because surely you could have just gone into the house and said, look, we want to do this thing, and you're going to play your voicemail. So there had to have been a process before you got that story.
There were phone calls to her first, as far as I remember, but it did involve going around having a talk. And I mean, something like that. Doing my job in Westminster, I find it's not often people don't want to speak to you. The MPs, by their very nature, want to speak to people. They want you to know what they have to say. Something like that story, these are people that perhaps might not want to have spoken about it. She did want to tell her story, but it did involve several phone calls, some chats, getting a bit of trust up. And that's where that came from. And so that is the way to play things. If in a sensitive way, don't just go in there and say, we want to do this. When you first speak to someone, just have a chat about it first of all. Just explain the story you're looking into. Ask them what their involvement is, what they think, and then perhaps build up to say, oh, it sounds really interesting. Would you mind doing something with us? Quite often, temptation is to say, I'm from ITV, we're doing the story, will you do it? If it's sensitive, sometimes the answer will be no straight away. And once someone says no, it's a difficult starting point to begin with. Just a couple of quick ones. This was... sorry.
Dominic
Stuart Andrews recently appeared in the news for being, allegedly beaten up by a Labour MP. I'm just wondering how you covered that in the lobby.
Obviously it's about to go to court, so we've got to be careful about what we say about it. But I was putting out our monthly political show, and then I knew about that, but it happened to be I was there the night before around the place, I was there the day after, and spoke to various people who were in the bar at the time all this was said to have happened. Lots of off-the-record talks, lots of people told me their version of the story, it was slightly, I wouldn't say difficult, but we had to think about it because alleged assaults, you can't just say what you like. We had to play it by the book. But it was certainly caught Westminster by surprise, I have to say, that all this had happened, or allegedly happened. It was just making sure that you weren't going to prejudice anything and being very careful about it.
You say you had to play it by the book, but what did you actually do?
I did a piece, I did a minute and a half piece, police statement, what the police said, the allegations, We carried Stuart Andrews' statement that he put out in the afternoon. Shots-wise, didn't have many shots. Obviously, this was something that happened away from any cameras. We can't film. There's lots of places you can't film in the Houses of Parliament, so we used shots of the Houses of Parliament. We used shots of Scotland Yard when we talked about what the police had said about it. So we're just trying to paint it up with relevant pictures, really. The first court appearance is next week, so it's all getting underway, and it will go on and on and on, and we'll see what happens with that. So that was a busy day, has to be said, busy day. Anything else before we? Yep.
I remember seeing a thing on a lecturer's door at university that said about journalism, you need to have oodles of charm, rat-like cunning, and a small ability to write. Do you think that's a fair reflection? That writing's actually less important than being charming? And
I think it goes hand in hand, because you can have all the charm in the world and get all the fantastic quotes in the world, but if you can't get that across to someone that might want to read it or be able to read it in a way that's engaging or interesting, I think you've missed the point. But you certainly, I mean, you must have had this all week. You know, you've got to be curious. You've got to ask the right questions. You can't be shy. You've got to kind of be able to chat to people. But no, never sacrifice your writing for the charm. Hand in hand, I think. Anyone else before the next clip? This is a story. There was a toddler called Ben Needham who went missing from a Greek island 20 years ago. And his mother lives in South Yorkshire, and she's been hunting for him ever since, searching for him ever since. She's convinced he's out there somewhere. The theory has been he might have been abducted from this island. And we caught up with Kerry last year. Again, a calendar exclusive. Various leads were happening over the last year, various potential sightings. And this was about the sixth story in the series, which is still ongoing. We're still following her. We're still constantly speaking to her. And this was when one of our producers went with her to meet someone that it was reported could have been her missing son. So this is just part of how we played it.
Not to attract attention, Kerry walked past first without us filming. Nerves were getting frayed.
I couldn't tell. I thought I'd be able to tell instantly, but I can't. Maybe, I don't know whether I just want it to be, but it does look like me. He's got the same shape, same nose, everything. I'm scared if it is, and I'm scared if it's not.
That guy looks exactly like Kerry looks. Same shape nose, same cheekbones, same jawline, everything. It's just that, it's the dark hair that's throwing us off, really, but I can't imagine him without it. We do need some professional advice on how to handle the situation.
Maria phoned the town's head of security. He agreed to ask the man called Savas to come to the station. Kerry was about to come face to face with someone who could be her son.
Never been so scared. I've never felt like this. I'm scared. My legs are shaking. I think they're going to give way. I have no strength in my legs. Let's just do it, okay? Let's just go.
Now visibly shaking, Kerry is shown the man's ID photo.
That looks like the...
No, okay, relax.
And then they come face to face.
He has brown eyes.
It's brown eyes, yes.
No, not blue.
It's quite powerful. You know, she's been searching for her son for 20 years now. But Kerry trusts the reporter or the producer that's been doing that. She trusts him absolutely, and so much so. That access, I don't know if you agree, that access was pretty fantastic in terms you could actually see it on her face. It's a very moving story, but it just goes to show that ringing someone up every now and then, asking them if there's any developments. I mean, that's what he does. He keeps ringing her to say anything else. And like I said, that was the 5th, 6th story in the stories so far. So it's quite a powerful thing.
I have a problem with that because at some point the parent has got to be allowed to, in whatever way they can, carry on with their lives. With you asking, is there any new developments, isn't there a sense that you are creating the story and pushing the story rather than the thing just being as it is? You're affecting the story. And I don't know whether that's a story, because I presume it turned out it's not him.
Mm.
So is that a story anyway?
I think so.
If it was him, then fine, and you did it that way, and that's fine. But it wasn't him, so I don't think that should have been broadcast.
But we didn't know it wasn't him beforehand. The point of this is that this is an ongoing campaign. She is not letting this lie, and she has a team of people that are friends and family that are doing this constantly. So this would be going on whether we were involved or not. So it's not of a case of us pushing this to create a story. This story is happening. We're just covering it. But
there has to be questions about trying to find new angles and reposition the story. Yes, I suppose if you want to reposition it every so often because you have to keep it in the public sort of conscious to keep people thinking about the story. But I don't know. I think it's a bit of a murky
I see what you mean. But if this was a mother that wanted to let things lie as they were, we wouldn't then phone back and say, "Go on, let's do something." We wouldn't keep doing this. Kerry wants to keep this story very much alive, and we're following her on something that would happen anyway. If it had been someone that didn't want to, we would not keep ringing back. And I think that's where what the difference is.
How does that relationship work with a family like that? Because it feels like you've got an exclusive sort of access to them. Nobody else is really reporting the story as much as you guys are. I mean, it's Ben Needham's a calendar story.
Mm.
So, I mean, how does the relationship with the family work?
I mean, that, again, it began with some phone calls. It began by popping along to see them. We've done stuff over the years. I mean, you may have seen it on various TV stations, been in the papers for years and years. Popped along, had a chat, built up that element of trust. You know, we haven't got an ulterior motive. We're not trying to catch them out at all. And we began by doing just a few stories here. And as the story rolled on, they got in touch with us, or rather our producer, Mark Whitty, to say, listen, you know, this might be happening. Because there is that bond of trust there. And that's when something like that happened. And he went on the trip, fantastic access, but it's because of that bond of trust that they built up over those few stories they'd done initially, but that carried on into something like that. And I think that can transfer into any story. If you keep a good relationship with someone, that's why sources are so good to keep, because they will keep coming back with bits and pieces. Anything else on Ben Needham?
Well, personally, I was for that article, you know, to be published, because she clearly wants the publicity in the hope that somebody out there will say, well, I know somebody who's 19 years old who might, you know, it's a desperate hope to find him. And yeah, I think it's good work that, you know, you keep reminding the people that, you know, he's still missing.
I mean, that snowballed, actually, because that went out on Greek television, it went out on Australian television. You know, there's clearly lots of interest in it. She's happy to do it. You know, it worked well. I think it's a good story to tell. added value. It has, it has a good purpose, I guess, about it.
Just to back up the point that it was a good story and that she does want it in the public eye, only 5 days ago there was an article written about a song for Ben Needham to boost the search that his mum's spoken to a newspaper about. So she does want it to be in the public eye.
They're keen. They're keen. Yeah. And like I say, it's a powerful story. And again, it's something I think I haven't got kids, but I think a parent can relate to that in terms of the biggest fear is losing a child. So in that sense, keeping you fit today.
A common theme throughout the week has been the importance of cultivating sources. Just how far and to what extent do ITV Yorkshire go to maintain that contact with a source?
I think it's gone are the days where you went out for lunch or had a drink with someone. I think the pressures of the job mean it's difficult to have that kind of relationship anymore, which might have happened 10, 15 years ago. You might have some off-diary time to catch up with a source. Now, you put some calls in. If I have any spare time, I will put a few calls into people I've done stories with in the past, something that may still be going on in the background, and that's when you flag up something that hasn't hit the newspapers, hasn't hit the wires, and that's when you get an original story. I wouldn't say exclusive story, because if it's the latest in an ongoing case or an ongoing campaign, but it's just something new, make it different from anything else that's on Twitter or the wires or the newspapers. So it's more difficult to, which I guess makes it even more valuable to do.
I think with the kind of popularity of Twitter and Facebook and email these days, I think people are communicating more via those tools. Would you say there's any added value in actually picking up the phone and having a conversation with somebody rather than just sending them a message or texting or tweeting?
Yeah, Twitter and email, they can often be a one-way street. You're telling someone a message. I don't think there's any substitute for a chat, for a talk. Any conversation, you might go off on a tangent, and often that's when you get, again, decent new lines or an original story from. So pick up the phone. Don't just rely on Twitter or email. Great starting point. Perhaps you can't contact someone, send them an email, ask them to give you a ring, ask them if you can give them a ring. But there's no substitute for that, I don't think.
Can I pass it? With a story like the Ben Needham one, is there any sort of, if it's an ongoing relationship, is there any sort of financial support you give the family in terms, how does that work in terms of maybe paying for a flight to Greece, or how does that operate? Because I guess in some cases with the media, there's some sort of, bargaining that goes on.
Honest answer on that case, a journalist should never say this, but I'm not sure. I don't know on that particular case. Money is tight. Budgets can be tight. Tabloids tend to have a lot more money to throw at a story. So you might find in newspapers that possibly is the case a bit more than in television. I'll get back to you on that. I'll let you know.
That introduces another sort of ethical issue, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. But I'll certainly let you know. I'll look into that. But like I said, the newspapers tend to have a bit more money to spend and a bit more time on stories. The stories I've shown you today are stories that have been, a lot of work has gone into. A lot of our show today will be stuff that's done on the day. You get in, it's the nature of news, you get in, have a morning meeting at 9, and you're out shooting it, you're back, and it's on TV by 2 o'clock at lunchtime or 6 o'clock tonight. So in those cases, you wouldn't have any time to get into anything like that. But because there was a lot more time spent on that, you got more time to develop that relationship and get to a situation like that. But no, I will look in and let you know. I'd like to claim it's my story, but it's not my story.
Is it right to ask another question about politics?
Of course you can, yeah.
Right. There's quite a lot of cynicism around, really, about politicians and politics in general. Do you actually think, where do you see the fault is lying? With journalists or with the politicians? Or do you have some sympathy for the plight that politicians find themselves in sometimes when, you know, at the end of the day, their lives are under scrutiny all the time, what they say. So we've ended up in this rather risk-averse situation that our colleague over there mentioned, you know, the whole soundbite culture. So, you know, and I think the previous speaker was right when he said that people switch off because politics becomes boring because of the way politicians present it. But, you know, whose fault is that? Is that the public? Is that the journalists? Or is that the politician's own fault? Thank you.
I think what Rise is saying is there's a lot of cynicism about, and I think trust in politicians has been pretty much down there ever since the expenses scandal. And a lot of them you'll speak to will say it's going to take years and years and years to restore that trust. But should journalists not have reported that because it is cynical? I think the whole point of journalism is there's a lot of checks and balances in place. They're essentially public servants, and in any situation like that, I think there needs to be someone there keeping an eye on things, making sure it runs smoothly. You do get reports that are intentionally cynical. Some agendas are being put into play there, but certainly we just reflect what is happening. We have no agenda. So if that is, I'm afraid to say, negative, we reflect that. It just seems at the moment there's been a long period of lots of things happening that haven't painted MPs in a fantastic light. So that's probably where the cynicism has come from. Plus, cutbacks, there's a lot of negativity towards them. So it is a tough time for politicians, but we wouldn't actively do reports to change that. If that's the public opinion, we reflect public opinion. So we won't try and push an agenda. It's kind of answer the question?
Yeah, but I think the cynicism existed even before the MP's expenses. And what I'm really getting at is the whole political communication process, as opposed to what MPs have more recently been found to be doing. You know, the whole kind of soundbite culture, the whole kind of media training, and sometimes, not in all cases, but in some cases, the way that journalists are ready to jump on politicians for quite small things, but it seems to me often ignoring and really coming back on the big things, I think has allowed sometimes politics to be reported in rather a trite way that makes people switch off. I don't know. You know, you might have a very different view of that. I don't know.
No, I do agree, and I think you can get too caught up in politics. I mean, whatever's said at the end of the day, real people have been affected. You can talk about £1 billion cutbacks somewhere, but that means a public servant somewhere is losing their job, and that's why you need to marry the two together. A politician talks about cutting £400 million from a budget. We try and speak to the person who's going to lose their job at the local council. I think that's the way. That's our job, is to put those two together. I've often had a conversation with a lot of MPs. You can talk about cutting £7 billion from a budget, but until someone down the road loses their job or has their bin go from weekly collection to fortnightly collection, billions doesn't mean anything. It's bringing it back to a level where it affects people and they sit up and take note of it. But I do agree, you can be too much caught up in it. And that's what we try to avoid, I think, which is the best way, I hope. Well, I've literally got...
No.
I've literally got one last thing to show you. It's not politics, it's not news. It is. It's not sport. We're going to miss that one out. This is. I have to show you this because this is personally one of the best things I've seen on not just regional TV but TV for a while. It's our weatherman John Mitchell. He does these trips out into the Yorkshire Dales, into the country, and he usually they're walks. He takes in a few pubs on the way. Really well shot. Great team that does it. But this was at the RTS last week. This was held up as a fantastic piece. It's only a snippet of it, but I want to see what you think about it.
This is the longest water drop in Great Britain, 330 feet from the moor to the bottom of the cave. You could fit York Minster into here, and believe me, it's just as beautiful. But this isn't really the bottom of the cave. There's 90 feet deep of shingles and rock before you actually reach the bedrock and the true bottom of the cave. Well, Dave, I'm not often lost for words, but this is truly, truly amazing. Does it still excite you coming down here?
Yes, it does. Every year it's slightly different. Things change, the floor of the chamber changes, and yes, it's never the same, but I just still enjoy exploring.
So who was the first person to come down here to discover this truly amazing cave?
2 Englishmen tried to get down, and it got as far as the ledge. But eventually, the person who got to the bottom was a Frenchman, Edward Martel, in 1895. He reached the bottom. Then the modern era of the Bradford Pothole Club doing it, ourselves, and the other club, the Craven Pothole Club, stems from the 1950s. And we've been doing it ever since.
And how long have you been coming down? When was your first year?
1960.
1960, that was the year I was born. Absolutely incredible. I'm loving this so much, I don't really want to go back up. I know I'm going to have to go back up eventually, but it's just an amazing experience to be down here.
This is what I love about the Yorkshire Dales. Just as you think you've seen all the beauty they have to offer, and new surprises around the corner. It feels like I'm in the heart of Yorkshire, and this is an awesome journey that I will remember for a long time to come.
So that was John. He essentially went down a big hole, but I think I don't know what you guys think, but it was really well shot, and I think that's testament to a great cameraman, a great producer, a great presenter. And it just goes to show you don't have to do hard news. You can find wonderful stories that you want to cover. And so I think that's one of the beauties about this job. If you've got a story you want to cover, you can look into it and tell a decent story. And in this case, get some fantastic pictures out of it. Good piece, do you think? I know it's only a snippet, but there's some fantastic shots in there by a great team of people.
Lighting must have been a nightmare down there.
Simon White, our camera, had to go down first and light the whole thing, ready for John to come down. It took an entire day. It took a lot of convincing the club to play ball. Really, it's quite a well protected. Is probably the wrong word, but they don't like it being too popular. I mean, and you can see why. It's a beautiful place that only a few people see. But thanks to a lot of hard work, and it's all paid off. I think it was a lovely piece. I think that's about it. So unless there's anything else,
Did you always want to go the politics way, or did you fall into it, or was it just a conscious decision?
a bit of both. I've always had a politics interest. I've done sport. I've done news in my years at Calendar, but. You know, politics, it came up, grabbed it. So when they say where you're going to be in 5 years' time, you don't have to stick to that plan. If it does change, don't be afraid to change course.
Can we say a massive thank you, please, to Claire?